I wonder if back in 1981, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg really knew what they were making with Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, seriously, this film and the franchise that it's spun is a big part of most people's nostalgia. Could they have really known that it would have been so loved with 2 successful sequels, 1 other sequel, and another one on the way 40 years later? I don't know. That legacy is pretty insane, honestly. I'm not gonna ask if this movie holds up like I did in my video for Mission Impossible, because absolutely it does. What I want to do is look at the entire franchise and see what are the strengths and weaknesses of it as a whole, like I did with my Hannibal video. Just recycling ideas here, people. Anyways, I'm Greg, and this is a look back at the Indiana Jones franchise. Let's do this. Before we really get into it, I just want to quickly touch on the fact that, looking back on these films now, the fact that the entire franchise is built on a white man going and stealing artifacts from other cultures is really and the fact that if you look at the backstory between them, he seduced an underage Marion Ravenwood, that is also very I'm not going to be talking about them in the films themselves because there's nothing to talk about. That stuff is weird and outdated and very gross, so I'm trying to look past that while reviewing these films because they do have some baggage from being made of a certain time in relation to films and books that were made in an even earlier time. But it never goes out of style. Punching Nazis. Let's get into the first movie. Where it all began. This movie really sets off what the entire franchise will be as a whole. The action, the adventure, the globe-trotting shenanigans, everything that we love, it really just bang right out the gates there with it. It is just full of great set pieces and it's just an awesome ride of a film. One of the places I think Raiders really shines is in its character work. You set up Indiana Jones, you understand who he is, he goes on a really good character journey for one film in a franchise, and you never question what he's doing. Nothing ever feels forced. Harrison Ford in the role is iconic, but you could also really say that about the supporting cast. The character of Belloc really works as a foil to Indy, where he is a rival archaeologist who is working for Nazis and therefore must be punched. He works as a good rival because they're working on the same sort of intelligent archaeological level, but you never root for Belloc instead because Nazi. Both the characters of Sala and Brody work as counterpoints to Indy. They are fun and interesting and smart. They never feel like they're just there to be there. And they don't step on each other's toes. Like, you couldn't just one for one switch them at any point. They really do feel unique to themselves. And of course, just look at that Nazi major that gets melted. His look is just iconic, And we can't not mention Karen Allen's Marion Ravenwood because her character is fantastic. Especially for a film from the early 80s to have a character who is a woman while being so tough and independent in the role of, damsel in distress. She's always trying to make her own way out, trying to figure things out. She's an equal to Indy. And she's just the best. Not to mention the fact that the introduction to her character, if it's not, should be taught in film school because it sets up who she is as a person while also having just excellent camera work the entire way through. It's wonderful. The climax of this film is, as we all know, iconic. I can't say that about this movie enough, is just the fact that it is iconic. The way they set up everything leading to this moment where everyone gets their faces melted off and finally revealing that, this magical artifact is actually a magical artifact and not just a piece of history is really cool. The practical effects really hold up. It's just rad, I don't have a ton to say on this movie because we all just know how good Raiders of the Lost Ark is. People like this one a lot less. I think it's found its place in the fan base now, But at the time, especially, it was not everyone's favorite. It was very different from Raiders when it came out, and people did not love that. To the point where apparently people actually skip it when they watch the movies. They just watch the first and the third. I'm a big fan of it myself, but it's not a film without its flaws, so let's get into that first. The depiction of Indian culture in this movie is not good. The depiction of them is not great for the fact that they are a real culture. We all know that this franchise builds off of old pulp serial and novels in their style and story, and in this you can tell that it really is a product of influence from the 30s, because it's got a very outdated and wrong look at how non-Western cultures are portrayed. And it's not great not only because it's stereotyping cultures, but it's doing so with a real non-fictional tribe. It's not a good look. The character of Willie is also a really sore point for a lot of people, self-included. I get what they were doing. They wanted to create a female lead for the film that was different than Marion, so it wouldn't feel like a repetition, but it doesn't work in the same way. She is just a damsel in distress who spends her entire time in the movie just screaming her way through it. And that's not a criticism on Kate Capshaw and her performance. I think she really does the best with the material. When they give her moments to be confident and flirty and all that stuff, she's really good. She's very good in the role. I just don't think that there's much on the page. And that sucks because it lessens the film when one of your characters is so two-dimensional and honestly annoying. Short Round, on the other hand, is a character I love. It probably stems at least partially from the fact that I was a kid when I first saw these movies, and the idea of being the kid sidekick to a world travel adventurer appealed to me, but I think this character works a lot better. The dynamic that he has with Indiana is really interesting. It's something that you only really see in this movie. It's got a sort of father-son dynamic, and it's very comedic, which personally I think works to balance out the tone of this film and shows another side of our lead character that we hadn't seen in the prior films. Now, on the topic of tone, this is a dark movie. Likely fueled by the fact that George Lucas was going through a divorce at the time. This movie is heavy, but I think that works. We dig deep into things like child slavery and human sacrifice, and it creates a very different movie than what we got in Raiders. And I appreciate that because you don't want the same movie twice. And while it is much darker, we don't lose that fun action-adventure swashbuckling tone. From the opening bar scene to all the great hand-to-hand combat to the excellent mine scene chase at the climax of the film, this movie delivers some of, if not the best action sequences in the franchise as a whole. Definitely a worthwhile watch, really fits well into the overall feel of the film series while carving itself out as a unique piece within it. Thumbs up from me.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
So after the reaction to Temple of Doom, they decided to go back to what made fans and creators fall in love with Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark when they made The Last Crusade. You can see that in the film's tone, the fact that they are again hunting down a Christian mythology artifact. They bring back Sala and they bring back Brody. Not to mention, they bring back Nazi punching. Now, with the return of the feel and style of Raiders, does Last Crusade just feel like a rehash? Hell no. For one, if you watch these movies in the release order, it really feels refreshing to come back to this after the weightiness of Temple of Doom. And if you watch it in chronological order, because as we all know, Temple of Doom is a prequel, it really feels like these films take a character arc in tone with Indy, and that's pretty cool too. I don't know if they had done that on purpose or not, but it really works that way when you watch these three films. Part of how this movie stays fresh is within the character dynamics. While we do get the return of Sala and Brody, like I said, you also get a very new dynamic with Sean Connery's portrayal of Indy's father And I think that's really interesting. It creates this contrast with the relationship that Indy had with Short Round in the prior film. You understand why Indy acts the way he does with him when you see his relationship to his father. You get this great arc between them that culminates in Dr. Jones calling Indy by his chosen name instead of just calling him Junior. Real nice touch there. Probably my favorite part of this movie, if I'm being honest, is the relationship with the character of Elsa. They learned a lot from the love interest characters of the prior two, giving us another female lead who is an intellectual challenge to Indy, an adventurer in her own right, but then subverts our expectations by making her a Nazi. It's a really good twist that I did not see coming when I saw it as a kid, obviously, because what kid's going to see that coming? But it really works to deepen what is going on in the film, especially because this is the third of these, and this is the third time they've been like, all right, and we have to have a new love interest character each time. I think that move is fantastic. Of course, the action sequences are great, and I really like the climax stuff in the Canyon Temple. The fact that it was a lot more puzzle trap based instead of just action sequences and chases gives it its own feel, and as someone who plays a decent amount of Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games like that, I don't know how else to describe it, is just really fun and unique and different, and a nice refreshing take if you're watching all these movies to then get something that isn't just punch punch punch, drive drive drive, shoot shoot shoot. Overall, I think that this movie is a great finisher to the Indiana Jones character arc. It really brings everything together. You get a nice feeling of finality without ever feeling like it's over. And I think that's a good way to end a trilogy. Anyways, let me know which Indiana Jones movie you like best. And I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Hello?
Keep going.
No. I paid my debt. I did everything I had to.
No. You have to keep going. Keep going.
This one doesn't work. I could tell, even when I saw this when I was much younger, that this movie just doesn't feel the same as the others. The visuals are very glossy, very overlit and shiny, and there's a overuse of CGI that really takes away from the grounded feeling of these other films. The movie just feels out of place within the franchise. And then there's the aliens. The aliens at the end of this movie, they don't really serve any purpose that require them to be aliens, because in the end they just do what everything does at the end of these movies and kills all the bad guys for us. And it doesn't work, and I think part of why we're not really accepting of the aliens at the end of this movie is because it's not a good movie. As filmgoers, we are a lot more forgiving of one or two dumb things in a movie if the rest of the movie is great, but this one really falls short, so everything becomes a target on its back. That being said, I think a lot of the ideas of this film work. The execution is where they fall short. The idea of giving Indy a happy ending where he retires from adventuring and gets married and has his own private life for the first time, essentially forever. Not a bad idea at all. And I think bringing Marion back for that as the fan favorite of love interests throughout this franchise is a great idea. A great idea. They gave him a happy ending. Cool. Nothing wrong there. I get the idea of using the Soviets in the Cold War 50s setting, but there's something about them that just doesn't feel the same as the Nazi bad guys that we've gotten in prior films. And I understand them being burnt out on that, and after making Schindler's List, Spielberg didn't really want to use them as just punching bag villains anymore, but it does change the dynamic in a way that just feels a little off. I think they were included in some way in the unused script that Frank Darabont wrote at one point for this movie, and I like that because Frank Darabont really knows what's up. I guess I'll talk about Shia LaBeouf. I think he is miscast in this movie. The character of Mutt is kind of annoying and not exactly what they expected when writing him to be as the heir to the Indiana Jones throne, but I think he would have come off a bit better had they cast someone other than Shia, who, especially at this time, had a very specific way in which he acted. I still don't think the Mutt character should be leading a franchise, but I think he'd be a good part of an ensemble, which is, I think, where they should take this franchise. You know, you've got him, and you've got maybe the daughter that they have in the Young Indiana Jones series. You can have an adult Short Round come back, maybe a few other people, really build a team, and I think that would work really well as a setup for future movies. Should I rewrite this movie? Anyways, that's it for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the worst installment in an otherwise really good franchise. I don't know what James Mangold is planning for the sequel he's making, but he has been on a really good streak of filmmaking, so I guess I'll check it out. I'm gonna go in blind though, I don't want to get spoiled on things. Anyways, that's it for me. Let me know what you thought of the video, this franchise, which one of these movies is your favorite, whatever you want, let me know. And until next time, have a good one.